She was sold to a billionaire to repay her father's gambling debt, but what started as punishment turned into a battle for truth, identity, and unexpected love. Ariana Lockwood was supposed to be nothing more than collateral, but she uncovered secrets powerful enough to destroy empires. And when betrayal came from the one closest to them, she had to choose between survival and sacrifice. Who was Dominic Vance? Ruthless tycoon or a broken man in need of redemption? You won't believe how this ends. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories like this. The silence in the office was unbearable. Ariana Lockwood stood stiffly in front of the imposing mahogany desk, her hands clenched at her sides, trying to keep her breathing even. Across from her sat Dominic Vance, the youngest real estate mogul to dominate New York's skyline and the coldest man she'd ever encountered. His steel-gray eyes were devoid of sympathy as he slid a stack of documents across the desk toward her. "Your father bet something he didn't have," Dominic said, his voice flat and composed. "And now you're here, his collateral." Ariana's breath hitched. "People aren't collateral," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You can't possibly expect me to go along with this." Dominic leaned back in his leather chair, his gaze piercing. "Your father did. He wrote your name on the IOU himself, after he lost close to $1 million in one night at my casino." Her hands trembled as she picked up the papers. The signature was unmistakable, her father's desperate, familiar scrawl at the bottom of a paragraph that made her stomach twist. "In lieu of monetary payment, I offer the temporary service of my daughter, Ariana Lockwood, to Mr. Dominic Vance until the debt is cleared in full." She dropped the document as if it had burned her. "You can't force me to be your—" Dominic's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if it weren't so devoid of warmth. "Don't flatter yourself. I'm not interested in your virtue. I need an assistant, not a plaything." Her cheeks flushed. The humiliation hit harder than the insult. "Then why not sue him?" she asked, chin lifting in defiance. "Because," Dominic said, his voice darkening, "your father tried to kill himself last night after realizing what he'd done. He's at St. Vincent's under psychiatric watch. He'll recover physically, but legally and socially he's finished. Unless you decide to help clean up his mess." Ariana's world tilted. Her father had been sober, at least she thought he had been. He'd promised. After her mother died, he had sworn never to touch a card or a drink again. She should have known better. "You have two choices," Dominic continued. "Work for me for 1 year, live under my roof, handle my affairs, every appointment, every meeting, every late-night call, or walk out of here and watch me destroy what's left of the Lockwood name, including the charges I could press." "That's extortion." "That's business," he said simply. Her head throbbed. The penthouse her mother had died in was already gone, sold to pay off some other hidden debt. The small apartment she now shared with her aunt in Brooklyn was all they had left. This was her father's last mistake. If she didn't intervene, it might be the one that cost him everything. "What would the position entail?" she asked, swallowing her pride. "You'll live in my home, be available at all hours, manage my schedule, organize documentation, and follow my instructions without question," Dominic replied coolly. "Do it well, and in 1 year, you walk away debt-free with a reference from one of the most powerful names in the business. And if I say no, then I make sure no one in this city touches the Lockwood name again." Ariana stood slowly, willing her knees not to buckle. "I need to see my father. My car is waiting downstairs, but you have until tomorrow morning to decide." 24 hours later, Ariana stood in the marble foyer of Dominic Vance's Manhattan mansion, a duffel bag at her side and her pride sealed behind gritted teeth. The air smelled of lemon polish and money. This wasn't a house, it was a fortress. "You'll find your quarters upstairs in the West Wing," said an older woman with stern gray eyes who had introduced herself as Mrs. Lancaster, the housekeeper. "Mr. Vance expects you in the home office in precisely 30 minutes. Dress appropriately." Her room was larger than the entire apartment she shared in Brooklyn. The closet was already stocked with clothing in her size, sleek pencil skirts, tailored blouses, neutral-toned heels. She changed, her fingers numb. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the girl who studied literature at NYU and loved baking on weekends. What stared back was a pawn in a billionaire's game. Exactly 30 minutes later, she entered his office. Dominic didn't look up from his laptop. "Your first task," he said, typing, "is to reorganize these acquisition files by potential ROI and urgency. Then there are 5 years of receipts to catalog for audit prep." She stared at the tower of folders. "That will take weeks." He finally met her gaze. "Then you'd better start now." The Chandler Foundation Gala was a glittering display of opulence and polished lies. Ariana moved like a shadow 1 step behind Dominic Vance, dressed in a navy silk gown that whispered elegance but shouted subservience. The dress had been chosen by his stylist, the jewelry by his assistant, the role by her father's debt. Her only accessory was the small black notebook tucked under her arm and the knowledge of every guest's net worth, family ties, and pressure points. "Senator Leighton approaching from the right," she murmured without glancing up. "Wife Elaine. Donor to green energy initiatives. Recently voted against the rezoning bill you supported." Dominic's response was a mere flicker in his sharp eyes, before his face melted into a charming smile as he turned to greet the senator with warmth. Ariana knew was feigned. She watched him navigate the room with chameleon-like ease, friendly, familiar, deadly. Hours earlier, he'd barely acknowledged her presence beyond assigning her a 10-hour task involving expense reports from 2018. Now, she was his walking memory, a living social ledger. "You're efficient," came a voice to her left, lower and lighter. Ariana turned slightly to find Liam Rhodes holding out a glass of champagne. His smile was more relaxed than Dominic's, more human. "I'm working," she said without taking the drink. Liam chuckled. "So is everyone in this room, sweetheart. Some of us are just better at hiding it." She hesitated, then took the glass. "Thank you." "Settling in all right?" he asked, sipping his own drink. "Lancaster still treating the entire household like a boot camp?" Ariana managed a small smile. "She's informative. She's loyal. Been with the Vance family since Dominic was a kid," Liam said, leaning a little closer. "Back when he still knew how to smile without it costing him." "What happened?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Liam's smile faded. He looked across the ballroom toward Dominic, who was deep in conversation with a publishing mogul and his much younger third wife. "Ask about the year he turned 16, Liam said quietly. "But not when he's around." Then, like smoke, he disappeared into the crowd. 3 hours later, Ariana's feet throbbed inside the 2 narrow designer heels as she climbed into the back seat of Dominic's black town car. She'd spent the evening cataloging introductions, memorizing last names, and shielding him from awkward interactions like a living firewall. "You were competent," he said as the car pulled away. "But you need to work on your tells." "My tells?" "You flinch when someone mentions your father. Your jaw tightens when I'm particularly sharp with someone. And you were drinking with Rhodes instead of watching me speak with the CEO of East Point Industries." "I didn't miss anything Mr. Stanford said about the failed energy bid or his wife's new mental health initiative." Dominic glanced at her, eyebrow raised. "And his daughter's recent rehab stay, which they passed off as a wellness retreat in Oregon, but was actually a 6-week stint at a clinic in Utah. She finished last Thursday." For the first time that evening, his expression changed. A flicker of approval crossed his features, quickly buried beneath indifference. Perhaps not completely useless, then. The next morning, Ariana found herself alone in the mansion's cavernous library, cataloging investment correspondence while Dominic was off-site at a meeting. The hours passed quietly until her eyes landed on a framed photo atop one of the shelves. It showed a much younger Dominic, maybe 15, grinning next to a regal-looking woman with the same piercing gray eyes. "That's his mother," came a voice behind her. Ariana jumped. Mrs. Lancaster stood a few feet away, gaze focused on the photo. "I didn't mean to pry." The housekeeper stepped closer. Her voice, usually clipped and formal, softened. "That was taken at their lake house in New Hampshire, before everything fell apart." "What happened?" "She died that winter." "Cancer." Mr. Vance was never the same. His father remarried 6 months later to a woman barely older than Dominic, packed him off to a boarding school in Switzerland. When Mr. Vance Sr. died, the new wife contested the will, claimed the boy manipulated him. What did Dominic do? Hired the best lawyers in New York, beat her in court and in the press. Lancaster's voice turned brittle. That's when people started calling him dangerous. Ariana worked in silence the rest of the day, her thoughts looping around that photograph and the boy in it. So open, so different from the man she now worked for. When Dominic returned late that night and eviscerated a contractor's pitch in under 3 minutes, she watched him differently. Not just as a tyrant, but as someone who had turned pain into armor. She wasn't sure whether to be impressed or afraid. A week later, Ariana found herself seated beside Dominic in the back of a private jet bound for Vermont, watching the Manhattan skyline dissolve into clouds. She hadn't asked to come. He hadn't given her a choice. "You're attending the Aurelius Investor Summit with me," he'd said curtly that morning. "And bring the revised pitch deck. I won't tolerate another hesitation like you had last Tuesday." "I didn't hesitate," she'd muttered under her breath, but she had. When one of the investors asked her an offhand question about Vance Enterprises' expansion into Eastern Europe, she'd fumbled for a number. Dominic had filled in the blank without blinking, but the chill in his gaze afterward had lingered longer than necessary. Now, seated next to him in forced silence, she could feel the weight of that scrutiny returning. He was reviewing documents on his tablet, his brow furrowed, his fingers moving with precise control. Like every decision he made carried the potential to burn the world or build it anew. The moment they landed, cold winds slapped Ariana across the face as they descended onto the tarmac. The car ride to the estate passed in silence, the only sound the soft hiss of snow beginning to fall outside the tinted windows. When they arrived, Ariana stared out at the sprawling gray stone house that sat atop a snow-covered hill. It wasn't cold and sleek like Dominic's Manhattan mansion. This one had warmth, aged timber beams, flickering fireplaces, and photographs that didn't seem staged. It felt like someone had once loved this place deeply. "Welcome to Silver Hollow," Dominic said as they stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. "My mother's favorite." Before she could respond, he turned away, already issuing instructions to staff. A housekeeper named Merrill led Ariana to a guest suite that overlooked the frozen lake. "Mr. Vance never brings people here," she said as she laid out towels with a hint of curiosity. "You must be important." Ariana didn't correct her. The investor meeting began late afternoon in the estate's library. 3 men in tailored suits sipped cognac by the fire as Dominic presented his case with polished confidence. Ariana stood by his side, flipping charts and quietly noting each investor's reactions. She kept her expression neutral, though her gaze drifted repeatedly to one man, James Caldwell, the silent one, who kept watching her with clinical curiosity. "Miss Lockwood," Dominic said, nodding in her direction, "walk them through the risk mitigation strategies we implemented post-sabotage." Ariana stepped forward, voice steady, fingers no longer shaking when she turned the page. She detailed her analysis, how all incidents targeted projects linked to Aurelius, how the pattern suggested internal sabotage, not random failures. She saw Caldwell lean in, interested. "You have quite an eye for patterns," he said after she finished. "Not many assistants do." "She's not just an assistant," Dominic replied, his tone unreadable. "She's the reason we caught it in time." When the meeting ended and the investors retired to the guest rooms, Dominic lingered by the fire, a bourbon glass in hand. Ariana approached cautiously. "You didn't correct him," she said quietly. "About what?" "About me being just your assistant." Dominic stared into the flames. "You're not. Not anymore." The silence that followed stretched long. Ariana sat across from him, curling into the armchair. "You built all this to prove something to your father?" "No." He swirled his drink. "To erase him. He's still in every room," she said gently. He looked at her then, and in his gaze she saw not the cold CEO, but the boy in the photograph. "You ask questions no one else dares. Maybe because I'm not afraid of you. You should be." "Why?" He said nothing. That night, the storm rolled in with brutal force. Wind howled through the trees. Power flickered, then died. Dominic and Ariana moved room to room, securing windows, lighting candles, stacking logs into the hearth. In the living room, bathed in firelight, they sat in silence for a while until she whispered, "Why did you never visit your father in prison?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Because I would have killed him." She reached across the couch, her fingers brushing his wrist. He didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers turned, aligning with hers, pulse to pulse. It was nothing, yet everything. You don't have to hate everyone to survive, she said softly. No, he replied, but it helps. As the storm raged outside, they sat together, two broken people stitched together by something they didn't yet understand, listening to wind scream like ghosts outside the window, and for once, not feeling alone. 3 days after returning from Vermont, Ariana found herself back in the rhythm of chaos, sifting through files, managing Dominic's whirlwind of meetings, and fielding endless calls from board members still shaken by the sabotage news. But the air between them had shifted. He no longer barked orders, but asked questions. He lingered in conversations a little longer. He'd even brought her coffee once without making a comment about how she looked tired. It was strange. Almost human. Then came the press conference. She wasn't invited, not officially. But when Dominic's assistant mentioned the location, a downtown property tied to the Aurelius Group, Ariana sensed something was off. She arrived 10 minutes after it started and slipped through the back of the crowd. At the front of the podium stood Liam Rhodes, flanked by reporters and camera crews. He wore an expression Ariana had never seen on him before, calculated righteousness. The kind that made your skin crawl. I stand before you not as a disgruntled employee, Liam declared, but as a whistleblower. Everest Vance Corporation has misled investors, covered up safety violations, and knowingly falsified financial records to hide the truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Attached in this folder, he said, holding up a leather binder with a flourish, are internal documents bearing Dominic Vance's signature, documents that removed vital safety standards from multiple projects to maximize profit margins. From behind the crowd, Ariana's pulse thudded. She pushed closer, searching the scene for Dominic. There he was, expression unreadable, standing to the side, arms crossed. This is a lie, Dominic said, stepping forward. Those signatures are forged, that data manipulated. Is it? Liam turned slightly. Then why did your assistant help compile them? Every eye turned toward Ariana. She's here now, Liam said smoothly. Miss Lockwood, perhaps you can clarify for us, what exactly were you doing with the archived construction files last week? Ariana's mouth went dry. I was cross-referencing project codes for inconsistencies, at Mr. Vance's request. So you admit you had access to those files, Liam pressed. I accessed files. I didn't doctor them. Liam smiled thinly. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Her stomach turned cold. She knew where this was going. What many don't know, Liam continued, holding up a second folder, is that Ariana Lockwood is the daughter of Gregory Lockwood, aka Gregory Vale, the same man who bankrupted dozens in a real estate Ponzi scheme 2 decades ago. And now his daughter has infiltrated Vance's inner circle. A storm of flashes erupted from cameras. Reporters began shouting questions. That's enough, Dominic said, stepping between Ariana and the press. This circus is over. Clear the site. Security moved in, dispersing reporters. But before anyone could leave, Liam played his final card. One last thing, he said, raising his voice above the din. We have proof, DNA records, birth certificates, that Gregory Vale and Dominic's mother were siblings, which means Dominic Vance and Ariana Lockwood are first cousins. The crowd fell silent. Dominic's jaw tensed. Ariana froze, which makes their relationship more than just inappropriate, Liam finished with a smirk. It makes it illegal. Dominic turned away without a word. Ariana followed, barely hearing the reporter's questions over the blood roaring in her ears. She caught up with him just as he slid into his car. Dominic, wait, this isn't. He didn't look at her. I need time. The door slammed shut and the car sped off. Back at the estate, the house was chaos. Phones rang nonstop. Lancaster met her at the door, eyes wide with worry. They're calling it incest on the news. Ariana stumbled into Dominic's office, hoping to find answers. She remembered the photo, Dominic and his mother, and a name scrawled on the back. Catherine Vale. She scanned the bookshelf, found a locked drawer. Her fingers trembled as she tried her birthday. Nothing. Then she remembered the photograph, his mother's favorite lake house. She keyed in the date etched into the frame's corner. Click. Inside were old documents, adoption papers, photographs, and a certificate showing that Gregory Vale had been adopted at age 6 into a different branch of the Vale family. No blood relation. She exhaled sharply. Relief and rage fought inside her chest. Liam had fabricated everything. But as she turned, she found him standing in the doorway. Looking for something? He asked, stepping inside. You lied. You're clever, Ari, too clever. He shut the door behind him. But the damage is done. She backed away slowly. You won't get away with this. He smiled. You really think anyone cares about the truth once they believe the lie? She reached for the panic button under the desk, a fail-safe Dominic insisted on weeks ago. Liam's eyes narrowed. That won't save you. But she pressed it anyway. I should have finished this sooner, he muttered, pulling something from his jacket. Pain bloomed at her neck. Then everything went dark. The rain pounded against the windshield as Dominic gripped the wheel, tires hissing through the dark, narrow streets of Brooklyn's industrial district. His shoulder ached from the gunshot wound he hadn't let the paramedics fully dress. But the only thing that mattered now was Ariana. Her panic signal had gone off hours ago, and every second of silence since had clawed at his chest like a curse he couldn't outrun. His phone buzzed again, another message from his private investigator. The DNA documents were forged. No biological relation between Lockwood and Vance families. Foster siblings only. Walsh manipulated everything. He didn't need the confirmation. He already knew. The way Ariana had looked at him, the fear in her voice that day, it was real, and he hadn't believed her. The old Meridian warehouse loomed ahead like a ghost from another life, abandoned, decaying, and perfect for someone like Liam. Dominic parked a block away and approached on foot, moving through shadows and side streets until he found the back entrance pried open. He stepped inside and was greeted by the cold bite of damp concrete and the faint echo of voices coming from a corner office walled in by cracked glass. He crept closer, heart thundering, until he saw her. Ariana. Tied to a chair, her wrists raw, her head slumped slightly but still upright. She was alive. Barely. Liam stood in front of her, pacing with the measured glee of a man who thought he'd already won. He's not coming, Ari, Liam said, voice syrupy and cruel. You think he cares? After what I showed him? You're just another betrayal in a long list he can't stomach. Ariana lifted her head slowly, blood crusted at her temple. You don't know him at all, she whispered. He never walks away. Dominic didn't wait. He kicked the door open with a deafening crash and charged. Liam spun, gun raised. A shot rang out, pain seared through Dominic's left side, but he didn't stop. He tackled Liam to the ground, the gun clattering across the floor. They wrestled, fists landing hard and wild, years of rage finally finding release in flesh and fury. Liam landed a blow to Dominic's injured shoulder, sending him reeling. He lunged for the gun, but before he could reach it, Ariana's voice rang out. Dominic, now! Dominic dove forward, crashing into Liam's side just as Ariana, freed from her restraints with a shard of broken glass, grabbed the letter opener from the floor and plunged it into Liam's back. The scream that tore from Liam was inhuman. He collapsed, gasping. Blood pooled beneath him. Dominic stumbled to Ariana, catching her before she collapsed. You came, she whispered, her hands fisting into his jacket. Always, he said hoarsely, brushing her hair back from her face as sirens wailed in the distance. She clutched his arm, her fingers finding his wrist, that silent connection they'd formed weeks ago. Her pulse thudded against his skin, alive and stubborn. They weren't cousins, she murmured. I found the papers. They were foster siblings. No blood. I know, Dominic said, voice breaking. I should have trusted you. You did. You came back. By the time the police burst through the rusted doors, Ariana was barely conscious and Dominic had lost too much blood. But their hands never let go. The next thing Ariana remembered was the sharp scent of antiseptic and the rhythmic beep of machines. She opened her eyes to white ceiling tiles and fluorescent lights, blinking against the fog. Easy, came a familiar voice, rough and low. She turned her head and saw Dominic slumped in a hospital chair, his left arm bandaged, dark circles under his eyes. His hand was wrapped gently around hers. You look terrible, she croaked. His smile was small, but it reached his eyes. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Liam? She asked. Dead, he said softly. The police cleared it. Self-defense. She closed her eyes briefly, then looked at him again. And the company? We're fighting back. Walsh's embezzlement trail is unraveling. The board vote is postponed pending the audit, and the DNA lie, it's being exposed. He paused. But you're free, Ariana. That debt, it's done. You don't owe me anything. She squeezed his fingers. Maybe I want to stay anyway. A month later, Dominic met her at the edge of Silver Hollow's frozen lake, a small box tucked in his coat pocket. As snow fell gently around them, he opened it to reveal a bracelet of woven silver. Simple, elegant, strong. "For the woman who saved me," he said. She fastened it onto her wrist, smiling. "We saved each other." In the distance, lights from the newly launched Lockwood Vance Foundation glowed in the snowy dusk, a beacon born from pain, betrayal, and love. And as Dominic pulled her into his arms, their foreheads touching, Ariana knew that some debts weren't chains, but choices, ones she'd make again, every time. Sometimes life forces us into impossible situations, ones we never asked for and didn't deserve. Ariana never chose to be used as collateral for a debt, and Dominic never asked to inherit a legacy of betrayal. But what this story teaches us is that healing often begins at the edge of our breaking point. It begins when someone chooses courage over fear, truth over lies, and love over revenge. Ariana's strength wasn't just in surviving her circumstances. It was in challenging them, daring to dig deeper, to trust again, and to rise when every force tried to keep her down. Dominic, a man who built walls so high no one could reach him, found the courage to let someone in. Through pain, manipulation, and loss, they learned that trust doesn't come from control, it comes from vulnerability. That love, real love, doesn't demand ownership, but partnership. And most importantly, the story reminds us that even when our past tries to define us, we still have the power to rewrite our future. Redemption is possible, not by forgetting what happened, but by transforming it into something stronger, something better. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below and let us know. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about your own strength and second chances, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss the next story of hope, resilience, and redemption.